Grazie. Prima di tutto volevo ringraziare Simonetta e Francesco. Grazie mille per il vostro convito. E per me è un piacere stare all'Italia sempre. Però il mio italiano, come detto avanti, non è sufficientemente buono e parlerei l'inglese. Simonetta asked me to talk about reoperations, and I would like just to start my talk with the quickest reoperation I've done during these last few years in a smile. I was doing the surgery, and all of a sudden, as you can see, I lose suction. So instead of stop the treatment, and because the refractive cut was already done, I decided to recentrate the suction ring and complete the treatment. So that's something that you can do doing a smile and that you cannot do doing another kind of surgery. So this is just to highlight the quickest retreatment I've never done. Just a single case. Well, as it has been shown today, the enhancement rates after smiles is very low. In fact, if you take a look to what has been published up to now, for some of our colleagues, Goes, Secundo, Ivarsen, their rate of retreatments are around 0. Well, that's not my case. In our case, we evaluate retrospectively what we did from 2013 up to 2017, and our rate of retreatments is about 1.2, and another group in Spain working with SMILE for a similar period of time is about 2.5. So it's lower than what we used to have doing LASIK, but still a need in some circumstances. Which is the best technique to do that? Well, and there has been some of them, the ones inside the upper part are the ones that are being supported by the company, and the other two are relatively experimental, but I will also tell you a couple of things about them. So possibly the most common worldwide retreatment technique is surface ablation, either PRK or LASIK. Of course, it has been also performed LASIK, a full LASIK. Also, it has been tested in the use, if astigmatism is the main concern, to use incisional surgery. But there are two other possibilities, experimental, subcap LA, published by Donate, and ReSmile, published by ourselves some years ago. So the most common, as I mentioned, is surface ablation. And I would like just to highlight also something that has been mentioned this morning, the fact that when you are doing a PRK on the top of a smile, what you will see in Bowman is, and I think that you can see, it is highlighted in the other two sides, this kind of small striae. These striae in Bowman are typical after smile, and from my point of view and the point of view of some others, is the main reason by what sometimes the speed of visual rehabilitation after a smile is not as quick as we have with standard LASIK. And in fact, I think that most of the improvements that we have had up to now in improving our visual results that were not so nice in the beginning, about 6-7 years ago, is because of that. It's because the frequency of these striae is much less today than it was before, possibly because of the surgical technique improvements. So this, and again, this is the same reason by what PRK recovery is a little bit slower than a standard PRK recovery when we work on a virgin eye. The second most common technique for retreatment, and possibly in the future will become the standard, is what Zeiss has named circle. Well, the basic principle of circle is to access to the old smile surface throughout vertical incisions. So to convert to a standard LASIK using the same planar surface that we used for a smile. And there are several profiles to use it, in fact 4 profiles, but the one suggested by the company, and I personally think the one which is best, is this one, which is to create a angular cut about 2 millimeters from the original bed, and then to access, you can see this blue line, green line, and red line is this circle cut. So you access to the old surface, but widening the total surface in order to leave enough space for what we were mentioning this morning. So if you're going to do now an excimer ablation, so you will have enough space for your treatment and for your transitional zone in the way that you prefer to do it. So this is the second option. Of course, with this second option, you're losing the biomechanical advantages of smile because what you obtain is a flap. This is something that this would be the profile number 1, which is the same one that we are currently using for retreatments after standard LASIK. So the VisuMax has the possibility to do this profile 1 for circle, which is a vertical cut to access the old surface. So this was an old standard LASIK, but because we didn't want to relift dissecting the flap, we create profile 1 to open the old surface. Which is the advantage of doing that? Well, the main advantage is that you reduce significantly the rate of epithelial ingrowth, which is higher in standard LASIK retreatments. And this is the profile number 1. And this is an example of a complete LASIK after a smile procedure. So you can also, if you wish, do a complete LASIK instead of a circle, with the risk of having some interconnections between both lamellar surfaces. This is another publication that we studied the differences in refractive and visual results using different thickness for smile, coming from 120 down to 170. And we test the difference with the visual differences, and as possibly you already know, because this was published some years ago, corrected distance visual acuity, uncorrected distance visual acuity. So basically there were no significant differences between any of the different thickness profiles. But this study allows also from any biomechanical evaluation point of view where differences between one or the other depth. But with this study, we were able to test what I mentioned before. So this was one of those cases where we were using the 160 depth. And in this particular case, as we used to do in some of our patients in the presbyopic age, our goal was monovision. So it was a myope. We corrected the dominant eye completely. We left about 1.5 myopia on the non-dominant eye. But the problem is that the patient, as it happens from time to time, was not happy enough because of his distance vision. At night time, he was not comfortable, so he decided to simply take the myopia out from the non-dominant eye and use reading glasses afterwards. And this was the case that what I did is, because the original cut was 160, what we did is, and we did this in 3 cases, and we published that also, is we did another smile on the top of this smile, originally 160, The second smile was 120. So technically, no problem with the dissection, no problem with vision, so vision improved. So technically it's feasible to do a smile, another smile on the top of a previous smile, as long as you have enough enough space between your second cut and the first cut. So technically it's possible. Of course, to do that, the problem, as I tried to explain here, is that I have not yet done any smile for correcting less than 1 diopter of a spherical equivalent. And most of our retreatments are under less of this magnitude. So the problem is that we will not be able in the future, as a standard, to do a smile to correct our standard under corrections, because they are too low. But if you're going to do a second smile and you're going to correct more than 1 diopter, you can always consider to do another smile. So I think that refractive adjustments after a smile are quite uncommon, as I mentioned. The problem is that we still have some of them. And despite that, some groups, at least the ones that I know in Germany, especially in Germany and in some in Spain, are what are doing is what we did a long time ago doing LASIK. So especially in young people looking for a slight hypercorrection, considering that if there is any regression, you will not need a retreatment, but despite of that, you will need to retreat some cases. Today, surface ablation is the most common, although, as I mentioned, possibly circle will become the standard. Some groups are considering topo-guided ablation. Of course, if you are planning to do that, my recommendation is never do it before 6 to 8 months after the surgery, because despite of the biomechanical advantages of a smile, at least under my experience, topography starts to be stable a little bit later than with a standard smile. So I would not recommend to do a topo-guided before 6 months after the surgery. Of course, the main actual limitation of both to create a LASIK, either through circle or with a complete LASIK, is that you are losing the biomechanical advantages of a smile. That's why today I favor surface ablation in front of a circle or in front of a LASIK, except if for any reason my patient is expecting to have an extremely quick visual rehabilitation. Then if he or she is expecting this speed in visual rehabilitation, the best is circle and LASIK, because this is quicker than after surface. Again, from my point of view, if you are going to consider a LASIK, the best is to use a mechanical microkeratome, because if your new cut using a femtosecond laser is close to the plane of the old smile, in performing the dissection, you will have some troubles. If you use a mechanical microkeratome, to lift the flap is much simpler, and it doesn't matter if you cross the old flap, because there is no dissection, you don't need any dissection, you will relieve the flap easier. So I would not recommend to do a LASIK with the femtosecond laser if you're going to retreat a smile procedure. And despite that, one of the, let's say, first slides that each one of us used to use when we talk of a smile, that the excimer is dead. No, the excimer is not dead, because for most of our retreatments, and especially if we are going to treat especially aberrated or deformated corneas, we will still need to use the excimer. So I hope that companies will continue on the work on the development of better and better excimer lasers, because despite that perhaps femtosecond will substitute them, it still will take a long time before we will be able to escape from the use of excimers. Lastly, I just would like to invite you, this is a promotion minute, to come to Barcelona in April. We have a 1 day and a half meeting focused on lamellar surgery and dry eye. We will cover also some tips, especially complications on a smile. And well, I invite you to come. 23 of April is a very nice day in Barcelona. It's the Rose Day. And if you have never been there, I strongly recommend you to come, more for the Rose Day than for the meeting. But anyway, thanks very much for your attention.